What diet have you followed in the past to heal your thyroid? The goal of this presentation is to discuss the diet those with hyperthyroidism should follow. Hyperthyroidism, as an imbalanced gut microbiome, can indirectly exacerbate one's hyperthyroid symptoms, even slow down the healing process. Eating well is important. I like to talk about anti-inflammatory foods for hyperthyroidism. And so inflammation is an important factor when it comes, not just when it comes to Graves' disease, but other hyperthyroid conditions. And inflammation is going to be a factor. So you want to do things to reduce inflammation, to support the inflammatory process. So like, for example, omega-3 rich foods, there's no one size fit diet for everybody with hyperthyroidism. It's just about eating a balanced meal, a balanced diet, consisting of whole healthy foods. If you have hyperthyroidism, whether it's Graves' disease, toxic multinodular goiter, or even subclinical hyperthyroidism, then you might wonder what diet you should follow. Well, the goal of this presentation is to discuss the diet those with hyperthyroidism should follow. And so I do want to mention that I have a couple of previous episodes related to this topic. So episode number 4, I discussed hyperthyroid diet tips, where I discussed 3 specific diets for consideration, including the AIP diet, Paleo diet, a modified Paleo diet. And you could check out that episode by visiting savemythyroid.com/4. And then I also have a Q&A episode, which hyperthyroid healing diet should you follow? Released that in 2024. Around the time that I released my book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet. And so I discussed the level 1, 2, and 3 diets, which I also discussed in the book. And so level 3 diet is similar to a AIP diet. Level 2 is a modified paleo diet, and level 1 is a modified plant paradox diet. And I'll make sure to include the link in the show notes to that episode, as well as the other episode I mentioned. So I'd like to start off by talking about gut health and hyperthyroidism, as an imbalanced gut microbiome can indirectly exacerbate one's hyperthyroid symptoms, even slow down the healing process. So I've spoken in other episodes about leaky gut having an increase in intestinal permeability, which is also known as leaky gut. And so this is part of the triad of autoimmunity, also known as the 3-legged stool of autoimmunity, which I've also discussed in different episodes. So according to that triad, you need a genetic predisposition, exposure to one or more environmental triggers, and that leaky gut components. And so you need a healthy gut to have a healthy immune system. And the reason for this is because most of the immune system cells are located in the gut. So you want to do things to remove any factor that's causing a leaky gut and causing dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of the flora of the gut. And you want to replace things that need replacing, such as stomach acid. A lot of people have low stomach acid, digestive enzymes, even dietary fiber. Reinoculate with prebiotics, probiotics, and repair the gut, of course. But you want to make sure you focus on these first 3, especially that first component to remove. But you want to do things to repair the gut, rebalance the gut. So what I just mentioned was the 5R protocol. So remove, replace, reinoculate, repair, rebalance. So those components, very important to achieve optimal gut health. Again, not going to go into great detail in this episode because I have chatted about the 5R protocol elsewhere, but very important. And a lot of people overlook removing the factor that is causing a leaky gut. So it could be the foods that you're eating. Gluten is a big culprit. Could be a gut infection that could be a factor. So obviously here, this episode will talk about diet. So we're not going to talk about gut infections, but factors such as gluten can cause a leaky gut, and other foods as well. Grains, including corn, alcohol, we know can affect permeability of the gut. So I'd like to talk about prebiotics, probiotics a little bit. So probiotic rich foods such as sauerkraut, kimchi. Now, kimchi does have peppers, unless you have like AIP friendly kimchi, but you want to be careful about kimchi, kombucha, pickles, fermented pickles are foods that can support the gut health. Prebiotics, so foods with prebiotics, garlic, onions, leeks, asparagus are like prebiotic foods. And many of these are also fiber-rich foods. You want fiber to not only promote healthy bowel movements, but fiber also helps just overall supporting the gut microbiome. So I know there are diets out there like carnivore diet, ketogenic diet, which don't involve dietary fiber. And some people don't do well with dietary fiber. Some people might have a condition such as SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and might need to heal that before someone can eat fiber-rich foods and prebiotics. But really, for an optimal functioning gut microbiome, prebiotics, fiber-rich foods are important. So the concerns with ketogenic and carnivore, I think short-term, they're okay, but long-term, they potentially have negative impacts on the gut microbiome. And then when it comes to probiotics, I also recommend for my patients to take a probiotic supplement. So I recommend a combination of fermented foods, probiotic-rich foods, and probiotic supplements. And that's what I currently still do 15 plus years after being in remission. Now, I can't say I eat a lot of fermented foods. And if someone's eating a wide variety of fermented foods, like if someone's just eating sauerkraut every single day, I would still say take a probiotic supplement. If someone's eating like 3, 4, 5 different fermented foods, like they're rotating them, maybe they don't need a probiotic. But to play it safe, I've been taking a probiotic for many years. And with the probiotic, you want to just make sure you take one that's a decent potency, at least 25, 30 billion colony forming units, one that also lists the specific strains and not just the species. If you visit savemythyroid.com, you'll see that I do have my own probiotic, SMC Probio. But again, there are other probiotics as well. Just want to make sure that if you take a probiotic, you take a good quality one, because not all probiotic supplements are created equally. And so next, want to talk about micronutrients that help support the thyroid, as there are a number of key nutrients that support thyroid health: iodine, selenium, iron, and zinc. Now, I was debating whether or not to cover this here, because really we're talking about hyperthyroidism. We're not talking about like supporting thyroid. I mean, with hyperthyroidism, at least while addressing the cause of the problem, usually you want to suppress the thyroid. You want to do things to lower the thyroid hormones. Now, that doesn't mean you need to avoid these foods. Now, iodine, admittedly, is one of the more controversial foods. So there are sources that say to completely avoid iodine. In my book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet, I do talk about minimizing the consumption of iodine, and some might need to consume 200 micrograms or less of iodine. I think many people could eat more than that, but you do want to be careful. So, for example, seafood is a real good source of iodine, and I think people could eat salmon and sardines. Those are not too high in iodine. But if someone's eating certain shellfish like oysters, lobsters, those tend to be higher in iodine, and so I would recommend maybe not eating those. Eggs are a good source. Now, if someone's following an AIP diet, they're not eating eggs. And dairy is also a good source, but again, if you're following any of the diets, I recommend you not consuming dairy. But again, there is a time and place for iodine. You don't want to go crazy with completely eliminating iodine, and I definitely don't take that approach. But there's iodine, selenium. Now, selenium, really important for those with Graves' disease, thyroid eye disease. So you could try to get what you can through the diet, but many people do end up needing a supplement. So Brazil nuts are a real good source of selenium. The problem with Brazil nuts is, first of all, if you're following an AIP diet, you're not allowed to eat Brazil nuts. But then also they vary, like all these foods vary in their selenium content or iodine content, or I'm going to talk about iron and zinc. So you don't know how much selenium you're getting if you're eating 2 or 3 Brazil nuts. Maybe you're getting a few hundred micrograms, maybe you're only getting 50 micrograms. So again, I do recommend supplementing with selenium commonly, but on a wellness basis, I don't supplement with selenium. I eat Brazil nuts. There are other good sources like sardines, salmon, organ meat, mushrooms as well, good sources of selenium. Now, iron, again, iron is important for thyroid hormone formation, but it's not just, that's not the only function of when it comes to iron. So we don't want, like if someone has hyperthyroidism and they're iron deficient, we're not going to say, oh, well, that's fine, because we don't want to give you iron because it might boost the thyroid, because that's not going to be the case. So and again, some people with hyperthyroidism, many people have, like, they're okay with an iron department. Some might actually have elevated iron levels, but if someone is deficient in iron, now they might need an iron supplement, but they also want to try to do as much as they can through food. So most people know that red meat is a good bioavailable source of iron. And I mentioned that, I emphasize the word bioavailable, because there are vegetarian sources of iron, but they're typically not bioavailable, like meat. So red meat, poultry, even fish, those are the sources I would recommend to get your iron. Now, zinc, also important for thyroid health, also important for immune system health. And so oysters are a great source of zinc. The problem is that oysters also are pretty high in iodine. So I usually recommend to avoid oysters. And I mentioned that in the book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet. But thankfully, there are other sources. So there's beef, there's pork, there's lamb, there's poultry. Again, you might need to supplement with zinc if you are deficient in it, but goal here was just to name the food sources, some of the food sources that could support the thyroid. And like I said, we're not necessarily taking these to support the thyroid, because if someone has hyperthyroidism, we're not really looking to support the thyroid in that respect. And there's other things too. Tyrosine, I didn't mention tyrosine, an amino acid that is important for thyroid, and you get your amino acids ideally by eating meat. So yeah, these are all important. And now what I want to do is talk about stress, managing stress through the diet, because diet does play a role in stress. Now, obviously, doing things like mind-body medicine can greatly help, trying to eliminate the stressors, or at least minimize. You're probably not going to eliminate the stressors, but minimizing the stressors. But food can play a big role as well. If you eat a lot of refined foods and sugars, that's going to spike up your blood sugar levels. That's going to affect your adrenals. And so that's going to affect your ability to handle stress. Also, what you eat can affect your sleep as well, which also could affect your adrenals and your ability to handle stress. So yeah, eating well is important. I mean, there's a time and place for things like adaptogenic herbs, and I commonly recommend like a B complex, vitamin B complex, magnesium to help support adrenals. But eating well is important. Like I said, if you're eating refined foods and sugars, processed carbs, that's going to affect your adrenals. That's going to affect your ability to handle stress. So yeah, make sure you don't do that. Also, make sure you don't eat too late at night as well. I would recommend just taking just stopping. For most people, just 2-3 hours before going to bed, having your last meal. So next, I'd like to talk about anti-inflammatory foods for hyperthyroidism. And so inflammation obviously is an important factor when it comes not just to when it comes to Graves' disease, but other hyperthyroid conditions. I mean, really, regardless of whether someone has Graves or, again, toxic multinodular goiter, subacute thyroiditis, subclinical hyperthyroidism, again, inflammation is going to be a factor. So you want to do things to reduce inflammation, to support the inflammatory process. So, like, for example, omega-3 rich foods such as fish. Now, again, fish, a little bit of catch-22 because of the iodine in fish. And also, I didn't mention earlier, the toxins in fish. So it's one of those things. I can't say I eat a lot of fish. I do eat some fish. I mean, there are some practitioners will recommend completely to avoid fish. Others, like Dr. Sarah Ballantyne, recommend to continue to eat fish. And again, it's not just about the mercury. It's about other contaminants, PCBs, microplastics in the fish. So I mean, I know everything comes down to risk versus benefits, and sometimes it's hard to know, like weighing the risk versus benefits, like who's right, the practitioners who say completely avoid fish, or the practitioners who say, oh, the benefits of the omega-3s from the fish is going to outweigh the risk. And I think it's somewhere in the middle. I usually don't recommend eating like 5 servings of fish per week, but I also don't recommend necessarily excluding fish completely, because let's face it, it's not just about fish. Well, really, most of the food we eat, there's some level of contamination. and we can't just rely on supplements. So I do take omega-3 fatty acids in the form of fish oils on a regular basis, and I recommend those to most of my patients, just because most patients are not eating fish on a regular basis. And if they are, even if they're eating it once or twice a week, that's typically not enough. If you eat fish once or twice a week, you could do a fatty acid profile and you could see what your omega-3 index looks like. Most of the time it's going to be low, like ideally you want it 8% at least, but you'll see it low unless you're eating fish 3 or 4 times per week. Flax seeds, another good source of omega-3s, but they need to go through a conversion process to convert to EPA and DHA. So fish by far is the superior food when it comes to omega-3 fatty acids. But again, there's a time and place for fish oils. Turmeric and ginger are spices that can help to lower inflammation. And you could also supplement with turmeric or ginger, drink them as, I like to drink them as herbal teas. I think they're delicious as far as herbal teas. Really look forward to drinking them in herbal tea, as an herbal tea. Vegetables, again, nightshades can be inflammatory. So we'll not talk about nightshades here. Well, I guess we could talk about nightshades. So nightshades are tomatoes, eggplants, peppers, and white potatoes, and there are certain herbs like ashwagandha as part of the nightshade family. Again, it doesn't mean that these are going to be inflammatory in everybody, but in some people they are, and that's why they're part of this elimination diet, like an AIP type diet. So I definitely recommend taking a break from nightshades, but otherwise, other types of vegetables, leafy green vegetables, cruciferous vegetables are high antioxidant foods. So they help with oxidative stress and can help to minimize inflammation. If you are looking to do everything you can to save your thyroid, in addition to watching my videos on YouTube, you also might want to subscribe to my free online newsletter, which is called Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid. Not only will you get the latest news on how to heal your gut and restore your thyroid health, but during each edition, I'll demonstrate a different blood or functional medicine test marker that relates to healing your gut and or your thyroid. There will also be an Ask Dr. Eric section where not only can you see questions that other people have asked related to gut and thyroid health, but you can also submit a question for me to answer in a future edition. To subscribe to the Healthy Gut, Healthy Thyroid newsletter, please visit savemythyroid.com/newsletter. Bone broth, I would put that under the category of anti-inflammatory. Really helps to support the gut. So bone broth is great. And I'm sure there are other foods that I'm not thinking of. I mean, obviously there are other healthy foods. I mean, even beef, like grass-fed, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef. I think of it as an anti-inflammatory food. Some people think of beef as inflammatory. And if you're having a conventional, let's say burger patty or steak, or obviously going to a fast food restaurant, then it's going to be inflammatory. But if you're eating a healthy, again, grass-fed, grass-finished beef patty or another, I like burgers. Again, without the bun, and maybe some steamed broccoli on the side. But again, some people like it as a steak or other cooked another way. Either way, I look at beef as an anti-inflammatory food. So yeah, like I said, there are other foods, and I talk about some of these other foods in my book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet. And speaking of which, if you're thinking this is a lot of information, I need to write everything down, there's like just so much here. And again, I didn't cover a lot so far. So hopefully you're not thinking that. But if you're thinking, wow, this is just a lot, or maybe you're thinking the opposite, I need more information, more of this information, then again, you probably know about my book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet. Again, maybe you don't know about it, but if you do, you might want to check out the book. Again, you could find it on Amazon, or I'll also make sure to include links in the show notes. But again, if you visit Amazon or where other books are sold, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet book. And again, there's no one size fit diet for everybody with hyperthyroidism, but I talk in greater detail about the best options for those with Graves' disease, toxic multinodular goiter, subclinical hyperthyroidism. Again, what to eat, what to avoid, how to balance your macronutrients, the proteins, the fats, the carbs. Talk about oxalates, histamine, FODMAPs, iodine, molds, hidden allergens, how to support your adrenal health, heal your gut, improve sleep, reduce your toxic burden. So there's a section beyond the hyperthyroid healing diet. So a very comprehensive book. So if you want more information that's in this episode, definitely check it out. But let's now move on to meal timing and fasting, because a lot of people have questions about fasting. So intermittent fasting definitely has some health benefits on a wellness basis. I incorporate intermittent fasting. When you have hyperthyroidism, you want to be careful, especially if you're losing a lot of weight. Like when I dealt with Graves' disease, I lost weight 140 pounds. I was down to 140 pounds. I lost 42 pounds. I was 182, dropped to 140. I probably was not a good candidate for intermittent fasting at the time. And so it depends on the person. And adrenals, I mean, if someone had, my adrenals were also a mess. So even if I wasn't losing as much weight as I did based on my adrenal health, I probably wouldn't wanted to have incorporated intermittent fasting. So yeah, just be careful about that. I'd say 12 to 14 hour fast is pretty basic. Most people probably should be doing that, like overnight. Just stop eating again, let's say 7 o'clock at night, and then maybe your first meal no sooner than 7 in the morning. So that would be 12 hours. I think, again, 12, 14 hours is okay. The 16-8 fast is pretty popular. But like I said, some people can't handle that. Some people aren't ready. And then I've had people do like 20-hour fast, like every single day. I'm not talking about like once or twice a week, but every day, 20-hour fast, 4-hour eating window, which is not enough. You're not going to get enough nutrients. You're not going to get enough protein if you do that every single day. So like I said, I think going 12 to 14 hours for most people, again, not to say you have to do that. Some people, maybe it's 10 to 12 hours. And usually recommend eating larger meals earlier in the day. So breakfast, lunch. And again, if someone doesn't want to eat breakfast, they don't want to eat a later breakfast, that's fine. But yeah, if you're going to eat larger meals, you want to do it earlier, especially for like blood sugar. Like you don't want to have like a really big meal at 7 o'clock, even if you're not going to go to bed like 9, 10 o'clock. I still wouldn't have a massive meal at night. And regular meals, so intermittent fasting is important, but some people, especially with hyperthyroidism, do better with regular meals throughout the day. Again, if you hear other sources saying, well, just have 2 meals per day, it doesn't mean that's what you need to do while healing. It might be a good idea to have 3 meals a day. And as far as snacking, it's, again, everybody's different. Some people do okay without snacks. Some people need to eat snacks. I think a big factor is eating enough protein. And that really ties into the next topic I was going to talk about, just making a diet sustainable. And so one way is by eating enough protein, because if someone's not consuming enough protein, it's going to be challenging and you're going to be hungry all the time. Now, some sources will say to eat 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. So for example, if someone weighs 120 pounds, they should eat 120 grams of protein. And I think many people are okay eating like 75% of their body weight in protein. So again, if they're 120 pounds, that would be 90 grams of protein. So not 120 grams of protein. It's not, in most cases, unless if someone has like kidney issues, it's not going to hurt to consume 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Most people will be fine doing that. But for some people, that's a big challenge. And I mean, if you're eating only 50% your body weight in protein, again, that might not be enough. But 75%, I would say minimum dealing with that. So that will help to make it sustainable. And then again, some cases, snacks. Not everybody needs snacks, like I said, but meal prepping. So that's a big issue with a lot of people as well. I just don't have time to cook. Some people don't like to cook, which I understand. Some people love cooking. They just don't have time to cook. So that's when you might want to batch cook your meals for like 1 week or maybe twice a week, maybe like a Sunday and Wednesday, or again, maybe it is all day. Like Sunday, you just spend 4 hours preparing your meals for the whole week. And yeah, so you could also use things like a Instant Pot, like a pressure cooker for easy meals. Just again, planning ahead is important. If you don't plan ahead, it will be more challenging to eat well. And again, as far as snacks, so if you're not following AIP, then you could eat nuts and seeds. But if you're following AIP, then you won't want to eat nuts and seeds. again, you could have, it's not like some people, when they think of snacks, they think of not just nuts and seeds, but things like chips. And again, there are AIP friendly chips like plantain chips, could be AIP friendly depending on the oil that's used. Same thing with sweet potato chips, depending on the oil that's used, like sweet potato chips or coconut oil. And tiger nuts are a good snack. But again, a snack could also be like you could munch on some chicken in between meals, or you could eat some vegetables, maybe a smoothie. I do like smoothies. I can't say I have smoothies as a snack, but it could be a snack. Again, fruit, you want to be careful with blood sugar, but it doesn't mean you can't eat any fruit, especially like fruit low in sugar, like wild blueberries. So again, but that's, like I said, snacking really depends on the person, but really just about eating a balanced meal, a balanced diet with consisting of whole healthy foods. And I'm not going to go into great detail with the different types of diets here, because again, I have other episodes where I chatted about that. I wanted to talk about other things here. So again, if someone has Graves, I will say that I do recommend AIP diet, which in the book, the Hyperthyroid Healing Diet, is a modified level 3 diet. So there are some modifications I make. And I believe I do talk about that in the podcast episode I released in 2024, when around the time I released the book, like what hyperthyroid healing diet should you follow. So you might want to check that out. But again, Graves, ideally an AIP/level 3 diet. If someone is dealing with toxic multinodular goiter or subclinical hyperthyroidism, then a paleo diet or a level 2 diet is probably okay. If someone's a vegan vegetarian, that's a level 1 or a modified plant paradox diet. Again, check out the book or check out that podcast episode. I didn't want to just be repetitive and just talk about the same thing in this episode. Now, one thing I should have focused a little bit more on my book was minimizing exposure to seed oil. So I did talk about it, but not in great detail. We eat way too many omega-6 fatty acids and not enough omega-3 fatty acids, such as, again, the fish I mentioned. So, and the reason for that is because we eat so many processed and packaged foods. So if we're eating processed and packaged foods, it's going to be really difficult not to consume too many omega-6 fatty acids. And you can't just correct this by taking a fish oil. So if you're good in omega-3 fatty acids, it's not going to offset eating too many omega-6 fatty acids. So you want to do both. You want to make sure you're getting enough omega-3 fatty acids and at the same time not eating too many omega-6 fatty acids. So even if you're eating healthier forms of like AIP compliant foods, you still want to be careful. I mean, the big thing are the oils though. So if you're eating sweet potato chips with coconut oil, again, obviously that's a lot better than eating sweet potato chips with whatever, safflower oil, a lot better than that. And there can be also overlooked sources of omega-6 fatty acids. Like an example, and this is going to upset some people, like eggs, as well as eating poultry, just because the feed, I mean, even beef, again, if you're not eating 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef, you're going to get exposed to omega-6 fatty acids. So essentially, it's going to be inflammatory. And that's why I was saying earlier that grass-fed, grass-finished beef is, in my opinion, anti-inflammatory. And not just my opinion, other healthcare practitioners who realize that you're getting omega-3 fatty acids, the profile is going to be really good in grass-fed, grass-finished beef. But if you go to your favorite fast food restaurants, hopefully you won't eat there anymore, or at least minimize eating burgers and other sources of beef elsewhere that are conventionally cooked and have, again, a higher ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids. But the chicken and the eggs from chicken, again, I mean, if you're eating even organic chicken, they're going to be fed typically grains. They're going to be fed, I mean, many times it's going to be GMO-free corn, non-GMO if it's organic, but still it comes down to the feed. Same thing with the eggs. And I always thought pasture-raised eggs, organic pasture-raised eggs was great because, again, the chickens are just going to eat worms and other things. But I found out that even in some cases when you're eating pasture-raised eggs, they're still feeding the chickens things like grains. And again, healthier grains. If it's organic, you don't have to worry about the GMOs, but you might still have to worry about the omega-6 fatty acids. So again, I know it's difficult because this world we live in, it's hard to minimize exposure to environmental toxins in the food, which is another and completely different topic here. And now we're talking about the omega-6 fatty acids. So you might be eating organic chicken. And again, I do too. I can't say I'm perfect. I can't say I never eat eggs, never eat organic chicken. It's just mentioning that really you want to at least focus on these other areas. Like if you're eating packaged processed foods, even if they're healthier versions of these packaged processed foods, again, you're probably getting a decent amount of omega-6 fatty acids. So most of what I discussed here, not as much the seed oil, should have spent a little bit more time, but the book is really comprehensive. It already has a lot of information, but if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have had another chapter just on seed oils. But again, most of what I discussed here, including the insights shared in the previous episodes, the hyperthyroid diet tips and which hyperthyroid healing diet should you follow, most of it can be found in my book, The Hyperthyroid Healing Diet. It's not just another book, it's a complete guide designed to walk you through every aspect of managing hyperthyroidism through diet and lifestyle changes. Again, it goes beyond the diet as well. And so consider this book. If you go out and get this book, consider this your gift to yourself in 2025. Prioritize your health and healing by taking the first steps towards a better, more balanced life. And, with this book, you'll have all the strategies, tips, and insights you need, not only to understand what hyperthyroid diet you should follow, but also to implement them in a way that works for your unique needs. So start your healing journey today by getting your copy, taking control of your thyroid health. And if you don't do that, again, I still appreciate you listening to this episode. And of course, hope you found this information to be valuable. And so that's pretty much all I want to discuss. And before wrapping up this video, I want to ask, what diet have you followed in the past to heal your thyroid? So please let me know in the comments below. And if you want to learn more about how to save your thyroid and regain your health, then I highly recommend to watch one of my free webinars on thyroid health, which you can check out by visiting savemythyroid.com/thyroid webinars. Thank you so much for watching this. Give this video a like if you learned something new, and consider subscribing if you want to learn more about how to save your thyroid.